Hey, welcome back to the Black Male Archives podcast. I'm your host, Rodney Freeman, and we have with us 𝒞𝑜𝓁. Sir, how you doing today?
Pretty good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Oh man, I appreciate you contacting and reaching out and talking to me about your platform, which I thought was cool because I'm a blerd myself. So I like a
Mhm.
lot of comic books and sci-fi stuff. But I wanted the listeners to find out about your platform and what you're doing. So if you can kind of tell the listeners who you are, where you from, and your background.
Most deaf. So my name is 𝒞𝑜𝓁, as he said. So as far as my platform goes, I am a pro-black media analyst. So in other words, what I do is I look at some of the comics and some of the other like blerd endeavors that myself and a lot of my friends and other people like me get into, and I take it apart with a fine-tooth comb, and I look at the ways that black people are treated and really mistreated in a lot of these spaces. But I do this because what I'm doing is preparing people for all of the other things that I'm actually creating, because I am an author, I am a comic creator, comic book creator, I am a game creator, and I am an overall creative. So I'm preparing people for this platform that is 𝒞𝑜𝓁. And then I think the other question was, where am I from? So I currently reside in Kalamazoo, Michigan, but I'm actually from the Detroit area.
uh, and how I kind of want to talk about how you got into doing this and like where's your passion come from. So if you
Mm-hmm.
could tell the listeners a little bit about that.
Most def. So as far as getting into this specific space, it kind of was unexpected. It was a lot of digging and me trying to understand things about myself that got me to this point. So originally when I first got on Instagram, what I wanted to do was create a platform where I was just giving like black people a voice and just saying, hey, I'm a black male, like a young black male who is creating a lot of different things. And I want to be able to just get my stuff out there, get my name out there, and get, my content out there. And what I started doing at a certain point was looking at my content and realizing that I wasn't putting a lot out there. And that epiphany came to me when I had a conversation with one of my followers, who actually is like a friend of mine at this point, and he was telling me, hey, I just want to keep it real with you. It's like, I believe that you have a passion, but I can't really see it on your profile. First, when he said this, I was like, okay, he's probably hating or something. But he actually kind of had somewhat of a point when he actually made that, because I'm like, I'm not really talking about my ideals and the things that I believe in. So essentially what I started doing was looking at a lot of the comics and things like that I enjoy, and then showing or talking about the different problems that I saw that I think a lot of people were either afraid to speak up to, or they thought that they would either get canceled or somebody would talk about them for bringing up. So I wanted to really be a voice, not just for black people, but just for black empowerment in general, especially for blerds who typically don't try to go into that realm of trying to seek specific black empowerment specifically for black people. So I guess I say all this to say, the reason why I really got into it is because I looked at some of my ideals that, I already had these pro-black influences and these things that I actually believed in outside of my brand. And I started incorporating it into my brand.
Was there a situation or a specific like moment that you was like, I gotta do this? What brought you to that?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So as far as getting to the point where I had pro-black values, because that's, I think you're kind of asking me to a certain extent,
Mhm.
I had this epiphany about how my life had gone. I have been experiencing racism since I was 11 years old. And I realized that this wasn't just a situation that was unique to me. This was a situation that's been unique to all black people. And
Mhm.
so I had one specific situation at a job where I was racially profiled,
Mhm.
and that was the kind of moment back in, I think it was 2015, where that happened.
Mhm.
And it made me look at like things a little bit differently. It's like, I had this certain path to my life. I was going to
Yeah.
be a chemical engineer, because actually that's what my degree is in.
Okay.
In school, I was going to do all of this different stuff. I was just going to be that guy who was, the black guy who was just going to make a whole bunch of money because of the fact that, he had a high level degree and he was going for a high level job and whatnot. But what I came to realize was that, like, no matter how much money I made, how successful I was, whatever the case was, I always was going to experience experience racism. And
Mm-hmm.
see, I've always been like a blerd, like a black nerd at heart. So
Mm-hmm.
these beliefs were always still there. So now it's like I'm really examining like these things that have like happened in my life, all stages of my life, and I'm looking at the things that I enjoy as well too. And I'm like, I go to work, I experience racism. I go to school, I experience racism. But then like what I don't want to do is go sit down at my crib and either watch a movie or watch a TV show and then experience racism there. So I'm like, oh no, we got to have a change. So I think at a certain point these two things converge, and I'm like, this is something I really need to talk about. So I really dig deep into it on Instagram.
Okay, okay, I like that. I like that because yeah, I never really thought of it like that because we all, yeah, you're right. We go through a lot of stuff outside, and then when we um ingest this entertainment, and we want to kind of, get away from everything. Why should we have to be going through racism in that situation? So I kind of want to know, what were the top three things that you came away with when
Mm-hmm.
you reviewed some of this stuff that you saw? Were there certain patterns or certain themes that you came away with when you were reviewing some of this entertainment media?
Mm-hmm.
And what's your thoughts around that?
Man, I don't even know if I can peg it down to three.
I know, right? I was well, go the top ones that you felt are most important that you want to talk about.
Most def. So the things that I saw that I think resonate the loudest and the strongest are a lot of the lore that we see that are created by white people or the white supremacists are things that actually come from African culture. So a lot of times when we look at a lot of these superheroes and things like that, really they've been scalped from black culture and they've been turned into some type of like white remixed version of what they originally got that thing from. And so I think that that's the root of a lot of the content that we watch. It's really essentially a shell of something from black culture that has been turned into something different. So that's one thing that I think people need to realize. The second thing that I think is really important, and this is kind of outside of the bounds of like actually looking at the content and just kind of thinking about the mentality around it, is if you don't really understand how white supremacy works, what it does, and what it's about, then essentially you're going to be really confused by just about anything. So a lot of times you'll find people who will, look at blatant racism, blatant things that are happening in these comics and in these shows and in these movies and things like that. And they're like, okay, well, blatant instances are bad, or this happened in the past, or this thing is racism, this thing is not. And it's like, you can't play that game when it's their backyard and they're the ones who are controlling the whole game, and they have the balls in their court. Like, you can't play that game of, oh, it's racism here, it's not. You gotta really look at the whys and the hows and the patterns. The third thing I just talked about it is you have to study patterns. You have to study like this is the main model that I've told people all the time. Whenever you're looking at some type of comic, again, movie, show, and even a video game, anything that is nerdy that could have black people in it amongst non-black people to some extent, you have to look at it like this. You could see something bad and you could say, oh, that's one bad thing that happened. So that's a accident. The second time you see something that's similar to that first time, then it's a potential coincidence. The third time, it's a pattern in practice. And that's why I said it's important to look at patterns. So if I had to pick three things, it probably would be those. There's a couple other things to think about that are really important, but those are the main ones.
Yeah. When you were talking, I was going to bring up this too because I
Mm-hmm.
remember going to school when I was in school,
Yep.
grade school, and I like, I was a nerd at heart, but I did sports to fit in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I always would hear this thing about, if you're reading and if you're smart, that's considered white, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then if you're, of course, black people were good for playing sports, but not being like the thinkers and everything.
Mm-hmm.
How do you see that reinforced in like entertainment, like sci-fi stuff? And let's talk about video games because I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
we've touched about that. But I mean, what types of themes that you see being enforced in video games?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, I feel like the ones that I was telling you about when I was young, they come up. in so many different occasions, and sometimes people try to write it off as like, it's just like a little over, it's like a gesture that, okay, well, that was a one-off type of thing. But if you're seeing them over and over in these patterns over and over in video games, I mean, how can we recognize those patterns so we can call them out?
Most def. So that's actually a loaded question, but I can break it all down, simplify it. Well, essentially what you're talking about is how can we break down all of the negative tropes that take place. And one of the things that I'm actually currently doing right now is writing a book where I talk about all of the tropes that actually exist in entertainment media. And so these are anti-Black tropes, and we have to focus on the anti-Black piece because nobody ever does that. It's always people of color this, minorities that, we need to focus on how Black people are impacted, because Black people are the most impacted by racism and the least atoned for. So that's why it's very important for us to, first of all, have that mindset. The second thing that we need to do is recognize what these tropes look like. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of hand-holding by making this book and saying, here's this trope, like here, this is what race swaps look like. This is what I'm just giving you an example of another trope. The angry Black man trope looks like. The strong Black woman trope looks like. This is what it means. This is what that means. So what I'm doing is I'm psychologically breaking down what each trope is. So first of all, we have to take things and figure out a way that we would name them. And what I do in this book is I start getting real, almost goofy when I name these things, because I want people to recognize that, it's something that sticks out. Like, this is something that you'll see even when you watch a movie. Like, for example, you see a character that originally was white and now they're Black. Now I'm calling it the Black carbon copy trope. That's actually a trope I made up myself. And so then specifically that's called a race swap. Now there's some race swaps and there's some mantle passing, two different things. But see, I'm making these names to distinguish what's actually happening and really break it down so people can get analytical. The second thing, to your point, which was how why does this happen in video game spaces and also I think movie spaces, comic space, like why do all these things exist? The thing that people need to understand is that white supremacy exists in, I think it's 10 different areas of activity, if I'm not mistaken. The numbers kind of shifted over the years, but the area of activity that we need to really understand that this one is really taking place in is called entertainment. So entertainment is like, your social media. Entertainment is like your news. Entertainment is like, when you play video games. Entertainment is when you watch movies. Entertainment is when you watch TV shows. So all these go under one big heading of areas of activity that white supremacy affects. And they affect literally every area of activity that all people exist in. So that's one thing that we need to really examine. The other thing that you asked me about was about blerds, or at least like Black people, and known for not being intelligent, but known for being athletic. Here's the thing: Black people, all of us, our ancestors, etc., all over the diaspora in America, wherever, have been exceptional people. We have created things despite adversities. We have created great things even without adversities as well too. So what does that tell you? That there's a system of half truths that are being told. The athleticism thing is obviously very true, but the intellect thing is also true as well too. Think about the way that our people have persevered despite subjugation, despite systematic racism, despite genocide, despite just white supremacy as a whole. And I can take it back even further. Look at back in the day. They always say there was no Black history in Europe. Wrong. As a matter of fact, there was blurred history even in Europe and beyond. Black people were the originators of math and science, and they even brought it to places like Asia. And then they also went to Europe, and they were teaching them different customs and how to bathe, how to take care of their health, all these other things. So Blacks have always been exceptional. That's a myth that's been erased, so that we don't learn to think and we don't learn to have self-esteem and pride in who we are.
Yeah. Man, hey, like my daughter said, that's facts.
She's right, though.
That is facts, because that's one of the things that I feel like, and one of the reasons why I started this is because we have to be able to tell our stories and our narratives, right? Because if you let others tell their stories for you, they can tell it any way they see fit, Absolutely. So speak to a little bit about that too, like with your platform, why, and I'm asking a kind of a question I already know the answer to, but I need to put this out here. Why do you feel like your platform is important
Mm-hmm.
for especially Black folks to know about this and what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. So first of all, like everything that I do is centered around who I am, and it shows how unique I am as a person. Even not even just my name, but even like the actual trajectory of everything. It's something that you typically don't see. You don't typically see like a young Black man in his early 30s like walking around who's very proper as well too. Like when you hear me speak, talking about pro-Blackness and Black empowerment and things like that. So that's already one layer to just consider right there. Second
Mm-hmm.
thing to consider is what is being done, what is the purpose in all this. Like I said, for me, it's to empower Black people. It's for me to empower Black people specifically in a space where empowerment isn't necessarily a thing that's being done. The nature of being a blerd is being somewhat of an escapist, because what you're doing is you're taking an interest in these imaginary things, these imaginative things that you enjoy that are kind of fantastical, and it's not necessarily dealing with the reality of certain situations. So in a way, I'm dealing with the reality, but also enjoying myself as well too, and finding the balance in enjoying the things that I like the blurred endeavors, but also like putting that pro-Black edge into it, which makes it unique. Even my own name, 𝒞𝑜𝓁. The cool part is something to really think about right there. When I think about cool, I think about three different things. I think about somebody who is unique. I think about somebody who is self-aware, and I think about somebody who is authentic. So for me, I stand out just from like just my name alone. But if you look at the trajectory of what I'm about, it's like I want to be able to be the change that I want to see in my own people, the empowerment that I want to see in my own people, and then the change that I want to see in the things that I actually enjoy outside of this system of white supremacy that we thrive in.
Mm-hmm, 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 mm-hmm. Man, we can go on for another hour talking about this.
Mhm.
Tell the listeners about the projects that you're working on, because I know you said you're doing a book. Tell them more about that. So, what other projects are you working on right now?
Most definitely. So I am, as you said, working on my second book. Actually, I worked on
Oh,
my first book and published it, self-published it by the
awesome.
way,
Yeah.
in 2021. It actually was the first of a trilogy, that book that came out.
Okay.
I'm actually working on my second one, which is going to be a more like a non-fiction type of book, and it's
Mm-hmm.
again about like tropes and like identifying them. As far as like comics, something that I've been working on for many years now, probably I think since 2015. Well, I'm even going to take it further back. I think I've been working on this actually since 2011. I've
Yeah.
worked on two different comic books specifically, and it's
Okay.
going to be under the heading of like one comic brand. See, the thing about me is I'm a writer. I'm not really an artist. Like I can draw a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. I'm like maybe a B level drawer,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a lot of different ideas that I want to bring to life. So I have
Yeah.
comic scripts. I need to just get the right artist and obviously the capital, and then like
Yeah.
kind of put it together. So I'm working on a comic brand. I'm working on books. I have some games in the work as well too, but I'm not trying to, put too much onto myself. The other thing too is I'm a podcaster as well too. So I have a
Okay.
lot of like podcast episodes where I talk about my ideals, some of the things that I'm talking to you about right now. I talk about some Black current events. I talk about my own projects. I do audio comics. I do all this other stuff. So I guess that's why I say you can put me under the heading of the overall creative, because I got the comic brand going, the books going, the like I said, the games going, and just all these things that I think that people would really find a lot of interest in.
Man, that is awesome. Can you tell the listeners where they can find you on social media and online so they can be able to follow you and keep up with you?
Absolutely. So the main place that you can find me at is at Colas Creative on Instagram. I also have that same name on Twitter as well too. I'm not as active on there, but you can follow me there as well too. I have a website I'm revamping, creativecolas.com. You can find me there. I have a podcast that's on most major platforms, definitely Anchor and Spotify. It's called the Pro-Black Blerd Kingdom Podcast. Also on YouTube as well too. And I have a couple author pages. I have an author page on Facebook, 𝒞𝑜𝓁 Author, if you want to follow me there. So I'm in a lot of spaces, doing a lot of things.
Man, you're doing a lot of excellent things, man. And I
Thank you.
appreciate you being on this podcast, the Black Male Archives, where we capture, curate, and promote positive stories about Black men. Thank you so much for being on the show, sir.
Thank you for having me. Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
At 𝒞𝑜𝓁. That's another one you can follow me at. That's where I actually show my artwork, or my version of my artwork that I can from my comics for right now, so you can get a good visual. Meant to say that
Okay.
as well.
Okay, awesome. That's awesome, man. And we're gonna have to have you back to follow up about those comics, man. Because, like I said, I'm a comic book. I should say fiend, but I'm a big comic
Yeah.
book fan.
Yeah. Yeah.
so, so
I
yes,
feel it.
sir. Yes, sir. We'll have you back on this. So, sir, thank you again for your time. We appreciate you, and yeah, keep doing the good stuff.
Most def. Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
No problem. Anytime.
Mm-hmm.